So then you got involved in the movement. What role did you play?
Okay.
How do you characterize what you were about during the movement days?
During the movement days, after I became correspondent secretary, I became very active and stayed very busy dealing with the correspondence for the organization. I also had an opportunity to help with bringing in setting up the conference for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference when they came to Birmingham. I had an opportunity to set up the conference for the Southern Conference Education Fund when they met here in Birmingham. I was also instrumental in assisting Dr. King's staff in the person of Reverend Wyatt T. Walker when we invited them to come to Birmingham in '63. I went to Dr. Gaston to secure an office space for them because before they came, we did not have an office space. So I was instrumental in getting that set up for him and put him in contact with the people that he needed to contact in Birmingham that would help us get the direct action campaign taken care of. Then the other things that I did, my family and I were very active. My husband, my ex-husband and I filed a lawsuit during the 50s which was to integrate the parks in Birmingham, Alabama.
Okay. So you were really on the front lines.
Yes.
And let me just back up just a minute and ask you about, just sort of describe, what do you mean, what the corresponding secretary, what did you actually do?
Okay. All mail coming into the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights at that time, like I said, we did not have an office, and it was we were operating out of Reverend Shellsworth's church. So all the mail that came for the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights was directed at his church. And I would have to answer the mail involving Reverend Shellsworth's speaking engagements or funds coming in from different organizations about supporting us, or people who wanted to come to Birmingham to speak or wanting him to come to other places across the country to speak. And I had to correspond and take care of that mail for him.
How long did you handle that operation?
I worked as correspondent secretary from '56 until 1963 when I went to the federal government.
Okay. So then, obviously, then you attended the mass meetings on a regular basis.
Yes.
Can you describe to me what the mass meetings were like in the early days, and then whether they were similar or different during the time that Martin Luther King was in town?
Okay. The mass meetings from, I'd say, from '56 to '63, before Dr. King came, were meetings where we met and dealt with the local problems, the filing of the lawsuits, singing, praying, and we had a motivation speaker every Monday night.
Who were some of those speakers?
We had speakers like Reverend Edward Gardner, Reverend Pfeiffer, J.S. Pfeiffer, Reverend T.L. Lane, Reverend Shellsworth, Reverend N.H. Smith, Reverend Parnell out of Irondale, Reverend Thomas of Inslee, Reverend Woods, the Woods brothers.
All these are local?
All these are local ministers, yes. We did not have an awful lot of out-of-town ministers during the early days because it was really the Birmingham movement, and we were just doing things here in Birmingham without the outside help. So occasionally we may have a visiting minister may come, but for the most part we did not solicit any visitors like that. But these were local ministers who would speak to us to keep us motivated on keeping the dream that we had alive at that time.
Right. How did the meetings differ in the early days versus after Dr. King came into town?
After Dr. King came to town, the meetings were very different. The meetings were on a hyped up sessions, I would say, because Carlton Reese was involved more, and you had a lot more speakers at those affairs because we had so many people coming into Birmingham to assist. And they were really dynamic speakers. And they kept us in a situation where we were all excited and so caught up with the moment until We were all on a high.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Were Birmingham policemen present
Yes,
at
there
the
were.
meetings?
Yes, there were detectives, note-taking detectives. They were sitting in the back of the church taking notes.
And they were present at practically
At every meeting.
At
Every meeting. Yes.
Well, what was their demeanor? Did they just come in?
Just come in and sit down.
Sit down.
That's all. They didn't communicate.
Never say anything to
No.
anyone.
No.
No communication whatsoever.
No, they just
Well,
sat.
how did those that attended the meetings react to the police being there, and how did the leaders react?
Well, Reverend Shuttlesworth and some of the others, like Reverend Woods, Reverend Shuttlesworth, would throw out little hints at them and tell them, they know what their purpose was, and you all be sure and take this down good so Bill Connell will know what our plans are tomorrow, because we know that's what you're here for. And those of us who sat in the audience just ignored them, act like they weren't there, because we really did not care. We were not afraid.
So people were really not afraid.
Right, they're not afraid.
Do you think they were there partly for intimidation purposes?
I think so. I think that they were there for a lot of people would be afraid. They would turn some people around, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, for the mass of people, it didn't affect us at all.
Did you go to jail?
No, I was not able to go to jail. I wanted to go, but I did not get to go.
Why did you not go?
Reverend Wyatt T. Walker told me that I knew the people there locally, and he needed me out, and he didn't want me in the jail. So I had to stay and work with him directly.
You worked very closely with Wyatt.
Right.
What did you do with Wyatt?
When he came to town, I had to put him in touch with the ministers here, the churches here, the business people here. And when he got ready to go to certain department stores to set up the ground rules for the boycotting and demonstration, then I had to take him to the various areas in the city of Birmingham to show him what stores they were targeted and the libraries and things like that.
So you were more or less his right-hand person,
right,
in developing Project C.
Yes, right, Project C, exactly.
Yes.
Right, yes.
Are there any incidents that may have taken place as you and Wyatt rode around the city in relationship to what was happening in the wider movement at the time? Anything that may come to mind?
When we were getting prepared to do this?
Mm-hmm. Wyatt talks about making the walk, say from the headquarters or from A.G. Gaston Motel to various places downtown.
Right.
Did you ever accompany him on those?
No.
Were there any other things that may have taken place that you would remember? What's the most vivid thing that you remember about your relationship with Wyatt?
I can't think of anything that out of ordinary when we were doing things together, because most of my work were contained there at the office, giving him directions and locations of where to go. So he, Bevels, Andy Young, and that group of men went and did the actual legwork and out in the streets. I just gave them the directions, who to see, who to contact. So I really didn't have any contact with him going out in the field to do that. They did that.
In 1962, during the selective buying campaigns, you did some travel around the country. Can you tell me about that?
In December 1st, 1962, I went to New York, Boston, and to Brandeis University. That's where I saw Angela Davis. I went there on a tour with Reverend William Howard Mellish of Brooklyn, New York, who was one of the field directors for the Southern Conference Educational Fund. And I was in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, with Carl Braden, who was a staff member also. We went into the homes of people they had set up for us and talked to them about what was happening in the South and the struggle that we had going in our attempt to start out the selective buying campaign, because we felt that this was the only way to get the jobs and the white merchants to start hiring blacks. They were very, very gracious to us. Not only did we meet in their homes, but in most instances we spent the night there. They put us up in their homes. And they sent a lot of money back to our organization after that tour. And at the Christmas time, they sent boxes and boxes of toys and clothes for our children for Christmas. And what I did was, after they came, they not only sent the toys, they sent wrapping paper. Then I got a group of people together, we wrapped the gifts and toys and carried them to the movement, and they were distributed to people within the movement who needed for their children for Christmas. And
that way people then did not have
to go downtown to shop. Right, exactly.
Okay. Yes. Were there other tours, or was just this one tour where you went up east?
That was the only tour that I went up east, right. The other ones that came in were done by the ministers when they go off and speak and preach or something like that, but that was the only one that I did.
Was this under the auspices of SCLC or the Alabama Christian Movement?
Southern Conference Educational Fund.
Southern Conference.
Right, I was working with them.
Okay.
Right.
Did others in your family participate in the movement?
Yes, they did. I had my daughter at the time of the movement was 9 years of age, and she was arrested and stayed in jail for 5 days. My ex-husband was arrested for riding the bus, and he was in jail for about a week, I believe it was. And he also was a security guard for Reverend Shuttlesworth right at the church. He was also among the men who went to Anniston to bring the whites and blacks that were on the bus that was burned in Anniston back to Birmingham, and we kept them in our home, 2 of them.
How did you feel about your 9-year-old daughter spending time in jail?
Well, it didn't bother me at all. What I did was, we had a communication line with the person at the juvenile, and we would call once a day to check and see if anybody was sick and how the kids were getting along, and this person would give us information about it, and we didn't have any problem at all.
Where was she housed?
She was housed at the fairground.
At the fairground?
At the fairground.
Was that, there was a
When
building?
that mass, yes.
Okay,
yes, that mass of children was out there, right.
Right. I talked with another individual, and they talked about something called kites. When people would go to jail, they would send a kite out. In other words, a message written on, any kind of paper. Are you familiar at all with that terminology?
No.
Okay.
No. She would be, I guess, but I was not aware.
Right. When your child went to jail, was she one of those that came out of school?
Yes.
During the day? And
yes.
Can you tell me anything about that?
Well, since our involvement was so intense, our whole family was involved. She told me, because I was surprised that she went. And when I got the call that she was in jail and that she came out, and I said, well, what made you decide? She said, well, you all were involved, and I thought if it was right for you all to be fighting for our rights, we should help too. So this was
not something that you set out and planned, that she was going to be actively involved?
No, I did not include her. I didn't ask her to do it.
Yeah. How did other members of your family react to your participation?
They were very supportive. All our family members were very supportive. They were, my mother and father were very frightened about it, but they said they knew it was the right thing to do. Right.
What church were you a member of?
New Pilgrim Baptist Church.
What was the level of involvement of your church and your pastor?
The Pilgrim Baptist Church was very involved, and my pastor was secretary of the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, and he too went to jail on 2 occasions. So our church is very rich with civil rights history.
So because your pastor was involved, did that create any difficulty for him with others in the congregation?
None at all. They were very supportive.
So then your church itself was very actively involved.
Yes.
Were there meetings held at your church?
Yes, indeed, all the time. And the second meeting after the first meeting in Sardis was at New Pilgrim. Yes.
So that's when you got involved, when it came to
New Pilgrim.
New Pilgrim.
Right.